Okay, so this is Michigan's recap video for the 2024 college football season. So Michigan entered this season with a lot of expectations, obviously. I mean, they were the defending national champions. Michigan won it all in 2023. And what were they going to do in their follow-up year in 2024? You know, they had a lot of key losses, especially head coach Jim Harbaugh. He left to be the head coach of the LA Chargers. Michigan, I guess technically, lost both coordinators. Offensive coordinator Sherrone Moore got promoted to be the head coach, but he wouldn't be calling the offensive plays. That would go to Kirk Campbell. And then our defensive coordinator Jesse Minter left to be the defensive coordinator at the Chargers. He was replaced by Wink Martindale, which Wink Martindale has been around football for a very long time, and everybody knows who he is at this point. Definitely some losses on both sides of the ball. On offense, quarterback J.J. McCarthy, who obviously one of the best quarterbacks Michigan's ever had. I mean, statistically, he didn't do much, but he didn't really have to. But he did a great job of not really turning the ball over. I think Michigan's biggest loss was Blake Corum, the best running back that Michigan has ever had. And he got drafted in the NFL. And two of our biggest production receivers, we lost Roman Wilson, lost Cornelius Johnson to the NFL, lost almost our entire offensive line, Darius Henderson, Trent Jones, Zach Zinner, Carson Barnhart, Trevor Keegan. And then, especially on the defensive side, our defense in 2023 had a lot of great playmakers that would end up to the NFL. Mike Sainristil, Chris Jenkins, Junior Colson, Michael Barrett, to name a few. But we had some of people that would come back. Especially on defense, we had Will Johnson that came back. We still had Josiah Stewart, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. And then on the offensive side, still had Donovan Edwards, Kalel Mullings, and a lot of hype around Donovan Edwards coming into the 2024 season. People say, well, Edwards can step up. He was just behind Blake Corum's shadow. They thought he was gonna be so good that Donovan Edwards even made it on the cover of College Football 25, along with Quinn Ewers and the eventual Heisman Trophy winner Travis Hunter. So a lot of key playmakers came back during this season. Now, the biggest question for Michigan going into this offseason was quarterback. Michigan didn't really make a lot of effort didn't make an effort at all to get a quarterback from the portal, so they were just had a group of three guys. We had Davis Warren, Alex Orji, and Jack Tuttle, who had all been in the Michigan program for at least a couple years at that point. Jack Tuttle originally, he was at Indiana before and then transferred to Michigan. And then Alex Orji and Davis Warren had been in the system. We went through this entire offseason thinking Alex Orji was going to be the starting quarterback in 2024. Even during the spring game, he was the starter. Orji was the first quarterback that played in the game. And then Warren, Tuttle did not play in the spring game because he was injured. We had, I think, Jaden Denegal played as well. That's another quarterback we had on our roster didn't play. And then, of course, we had freshman Jaden Davis, who was a 5-star quarterback and then got dropped down to a 4-star. And he didn't really. I think he played in the spring. It was almost a year ago now. It's hard to remember. And the one thing that I noticed during the spring game, I said, man, our offense is not doing great. The Maize team defeated the Blue team 17-7. So only 24 points scored in total. And I'm thinking, is this going to be a problem going into the regular season? Will Michigan's offense be a problem? I didn't think much of it at the time. In the 2023 spring game, I was a little concerned about our offense as well, but we would end up winning the national championship, so I was like, it'll probably get buffered out. Boy, was I wrong. Michigan had one of the worst offenses in college football this season. They had the worst pass offense in the entire Power 4, and I think they were like the 4th worst in the entire country. I think they were down there along with the service academies, which is something that you don't want to be a part of if you're related to passing the ball, because the Army, Navy, and Air Force never really passed the ball. And the fact that Michigan was in that group really says something. So going back to the beginning of the season, like I said, the entire spring, the entire summer, we're thinking, okay, our quarterback is going to be Alex Orji. And then all of a sudden, all right, it's our first game, Fresno State, on August 31st. And we're like, well, all right, let's see what Alex Orji can do. But then all of a sudden, we're seeing the tweet saying, oh, looks like Davis Warren is going to be the starting quarterback. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm like, Davis Warren? Like, why did we go this entire offseason thinking Alex Orji was going to be the starter? Even EA Sports thought he was going to be, as Alex Orji was when the game released, Alex Orji was QB1. But Michigan rocked with Davis Warren in the Fresno State game, and he did not play great. He threw for 118 yards in that game, and an interception, which he tried to do on a deep shot. And then he threw for over 200 yards against Texas, and then 122 yards against Arkansas State. And then Warren would be benched. Davis Warren had 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in those first 3 games, and Michigan decided it was time for a change. And they've said that Alex Orji would be the starting quarterback in the fourth game against USC. Davis Warren pretty much ruined his chance at Arkansas State game, throwing 3 interceptions. That is not a team you want to throw 3. Well, you normally don't want to throw 3 interceptions in general, but have it against Arkansas State just adds insult to injury. So, Michigan said Alex Orji was going to be the quarterback for the USC game, and we won that USC game, but it wasn't because of Orji. He went 7 for 12 for 32 yards in that game. Our leading receiver, Marlon Klein, had 10 yards. This game was carried by our running back, Kalel Mullings, who had 159 rushing yards. And Donovan Edwards got into the mix a little bit. He had 74 yards and a touchdown, but it was mainly because of Kalel Mullings, 159 yards on 17 carries, 2 touchdowns in that USC game, 9.4 average. And then we're thinking, wow, we actually beat a ranked team. Maybe the season is getting turned around. Michigan, the next game is Minnesota. Michigan would come out and have a great game. But then that fourth quarter, Michigan really collapsed. And Minnesota almost came back and won that game, and Michigan won by 3. Then the next week, they had their first road game against Washington. Michigan lost. Alex Orji was the starter for that game, but he would get benched for Jack Tuttle. And Tuttle had 98 yards passing. Didn't really have a chance. He got put in the game during the middle of it. And Tuttle didn't play great in that Washington game. I mean, he committed 2 turnovers, had an interception and a fumble. Pretty sure Michigan was down 14-0 in that game early, and then we came back, took a 17-14 lead, and then Washington ended up winning 27-17. But then we had a bye week. Okay, we got Illinois in 2 weeks. This is our bye week. What are we doing at quarterback? The Michigan announced Jack Tuttle will be the starter against Illinois. We go out in the Champaign, and Michigan plays their worst game I've ever seen. Michigan lost 21-7. Michigan could only put up 7 points on offense. That is not something that you want Michigan to do. In the Jim Harbaugh era, Michigan never had a game where they scored only single digits. We scored at least double digits in every single game with Jim Harbaugh. And Jack Tuttle did not look good. Yes, he did throw for 208 yards. He had 2 interceptions. Right, and I only say that he threw 1, but man, he threw 1 earlier in the game that was called back. He threw the ball right to an Illinois defender. There was literally no Michigan receivers in the same zip code as that Illinois defender. He just intercepted it, but it gets called back because of an Illinois holding call on the other side of the field. So it ended up not counting. But man, he really threw 2 interceptions in that game, and they were like, well, we're 4-3, and we're in quarterback limbo at this point. It's it doesn't matter who we start. It's like picking the worst smelling of the 3 piles of crap, or picking the the best smelling out of the 3 piles of crap. And then, okay, so after that game, we say, all right, Davis Warren will be back to being the starter against Michigan State. We do win that game, and then after the Michigan State game, Jack Tuttle announces his retirement. That's right, Jack Tuttle announced that he was retiring from football. He said he was concerned about his body due to his injuries, and he did not want to risk getting more injured. So, Davis Warren would end up being the starter for the rest of the season. We would get a win against Michigan State, back-to-back losses against Oregon and Indiana, then a win against Northwestern, and then, most notably, a win against Ohio State. I mean, one of the biggest upsets of the 2024 season. I mean, nobody saw that coming. Everybody was saying, oh, this is going to be a blowout. Like, there's no way Michigan, like, I'd be surprised if Michigan even, like, scores. And then they win the game 13-10. So anyway, I want to talk about like the coaches and obviously. So this was Sharon Moore's first season as Michigan head coach, and obviously there was a lot of frustrations during the year. You know, we had 5 losses. That doesn't really happen. It's the first time we've lost 5 games in a season since 2017, and in Moore's first season, Harbaugh, we went 10-3 in Harbaugh's first season, but I will say Michigan had a better quarterback room in 2015 than we had this year. And Kurt Campbell, offensive coordinator, man, he was terrible, and he was so bad that he got fired. Kurt Campbell only coached 1 season for Michigan as offensive coordinator before he got fired. And we announced, I think, Chip Lindsey is going to be our next offensive coordinator for 2025. Now, the defensive side of the ball, we had Wink Martindale. Man, I will say this firsthand. I was heavily against Wink Martindale to start the season. I thought our defense was not playing great. Our third down defense was terrible, especially in that Texas game. Like, I understand Texas has a great offense, but it seemed like our defense played great, stopped them on first and second down. But every time, and it's happened in a lot of other games too, every time it was third down, it doesn't matter how long they had to go, it felt like they always converted. But ever since the Indiana game, we just like our defense just clicked. And they just have been playing nothing but lights out since. Indiana was the highest scoring offense in college football this season, and they only put up 20 on us. They did put 14 points early, but they only scored 6 points in the entire second half. We only allowed 6 points against Northwestern. We had our best offensive performance of the season, putting up 50 points on Northwestern. Now that's a shock, considering how crappy our offense was in 2024. The fact that, even though it was against Northwestern, the fact that we scored 50 points in that game is just crazy. And then on the Ohio State game, that was Michigan's defense best performance of the entire season. We only allowed them to score 10 points. Now granted, they did miss 2 chip shot field goals that could have put them at 16. But with all the playmakers that Ohio State has in offense and the production that they're putting up in the playoffs against Tennessee and Oregon, the fact that they only put 10 points on us is crazy. Ohio State didn't score a single point in the second half, and they went the last 20 minutes of game time without getting a single first down. So, my opinion on Wink Martindale has changed heavily. I was extremely against him to start the season, but now I think Wink Martindale is amazing. I think if our defense plays as good as it did in 2025, then we're going to have one of the best defenses in college football next season. I can just guarantee it. But not a lot of great moments of the 2024 season. And then we did beat Alabama in our bowl game in the ReliaQuest Bowl 19-13. And Davis Warren unfortunately suffered a torn ACL in that game, which is unfortunate for Davis, but we'll see how it goes. But Michigan went 8-5 in 2024, and what was our biggest problems? Well, our quarterback room was our biggest problem. We had Davis Warren, Alex Orji, and Jack Tuttle. None of those guys scream, "Oh my God, these players are amazing." Davis Warren, he has some eligibility left, but probably won't play next year since he suffered a torn ACL very late. It takes about a year to fully recover, so Davis Warren probably is not going to be able to play the entirety of 2025. Alex Orji is transferring, which, you know what? Fine. He's not good. I don't know why Alex Orji thinks he can be quarterback, because he can't. He can't throw the ball, and then when he tries to run the ball, sometimes it works, but most of the time it just doesn't work. Whenever we had Alex Orji in, and this was very evident in the Oregon-Indiana game, we would have Davis Warren, obviously, and then here comes Alex Orji. And every time they put Alex Orji, I was like, well, we're giving up on this drive, because we did the same thing every time. The fullback would be behind. Whatever way he motioned was the way that Orji was going to run, and then it never worked, which is a big reason why Kurt Campbell got fired. I mean, Kurt Campbell was terrible. I mean, all of his play calls, I mean, the fact that how productive our offense had been the past few years, and you come into this year and then you struggle to put up, like, I think we only scored at least 30 points once when we put 50 against Northwestern. And we had multiple games where our quarterbacks struggled to get over 100 yards passing. And our leading receiver this season was our tight end, Colston Loveland, by a huge margin. He was our leading receiver by 300 yards. Our number 2 was Tyler Morris, who had a little over 200. Maybe, let me check and see. Who was our second? Tyler Morris. Yes, sir. Colston Loveland had 582 yards on 56 catches, 5 touchdowns. Tyler Morris, 248 yards on 23 catches and 2 touchdowns. One of my biggest problems on the offense, did not utilize our receivers. Man, it just seemed like if Michigan completed a forward pass, that was just like, oh my God, wow, we actually threw the ball. And it was complete. It seemed like the only time we could get completions is if we did a screen pass. And the only time we were able to successfully complete a pass past the line of scrimmage was when we threw it to Colston Loveland. Tyler Morris, Samaj Morgan, Frederick Moore, Kendrick Bell, I'm pretty sure that's his name. They did like absolutely nothing. The only time we were getting our playmakers was with our tight ends, with Colston Loveland. Marlon Klein did stuff. Peyton O'Leary stepped up this year as well. And we have a promising freshman tight end, Hogan Hansen. And that's a big problem that I definitely want fixed next season. I want to utilize wide receivers more. This feels like how it was back in 2017 when Michigan couldn't complete a single pass to a wide receiver. And now here we are again. Can't complete a single pass to a wide receiver. And definitely we need a better quarterback. We do have the biggest talk of college football is this Bryce Underwood kid coming into Michigan. Michigan paid him $12.5 million to play for the Maize and Blue. Will he pay out? We'll see. But I feel like Bryce Underwood could be the starter next year, but that'll be for another time. It's only January. We won't find out until like August who's starting. But defense, we had a great play. Mason Graham did not play as dominantly as I expected him to. Mason Graham still had a great season, but I thought he would get to the quarterback a bit more. He only had 3.5 sacks this season. The sack leader for Michigan was Josiah Stewart, who had 8.5. Man, what a big step up. Josiah Stewart really stepped up this season. 8.5 sacks. TJ Guy had 5.5. Derek Moore had 4. So I thought Mason Graham or Kenneth Grant would be our sack leader this year. No, there's 3 more guys that had more sacks than Mason Graham. And our interceptions leader, we have a 4-way tie with 2. Amir Hall, Zeke Berry, Will Johnson, and Makari Page all had 2 interceptions this year. Will Johnson returned his 2 interceptions, both for touchdowns. Forced fumbles. Josiah Stewart forced 2 fumbles this year. And that's our tackles. Our tackling leader this year was Ernest Hausman, another player I was extremely happy with on defense. He stepped up great this year. And running backs. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about Donovan Edwards. As much as this displeases me to say, it is true. I really think the entire career, Donovan Edwards just did not pay off. He was not consistent enough. Yes, I thought Donovan Edwards had a great 2022. He seemed like he was on the same page with Blake Corum. Both of them were getting the same amount of production. They were both doing great with it. But then, next year, Blake Corum 2023, Blake Corum was our guy. Donovan Edwards was like non-existent this year. People that, oh, Donovan Edwards is going to step up this year. He's going to be great. He did literally nothing. Kalel Mullings was our leading rusher this year. He had 948 yards and 185 carries. Donovan Edwards had 128 carries, had 589 yards. Donovan Edwards could not rush over 50 yards a single time. That's not true. He did. He could not get over 100 yards a single time. I think he only got over 50 yards once or twice. And this guy was noteworthy enough to be on the cover of College Football 25. Donovan Edwards' entire career at Michigan was a big disappointment, in my opinion. I thought he would have stepped up more, but the fact that he was named our starting running back in Week 1, he got outperformed by Kalel Mullings, who was a linebacker 2 years ago. It's just, I don't know. It's every time we gave the ball to Donovan Edwards, we would hand it off, and he would just go up for a 2-yard gain to get tackled immediately. Ball security was a big problem for Donovan Edwards. He fumbled quite a bit this year. Kalel Mullings, if he did fumble, I don't remember. But that was my biggest problem with Donovan Edwards. And you guys could say, well, Michigan's offensive line wasn't the greatest. That is true, but last year our offensive line was amazing, and Donovan Edwards couldn't do anything. The only time this season where he had the 2022 Penn State game, he played amazing. Obviously, the 2022 Ohio State game, he had over 200 rushing yards. And then the national championship game last year. He was not consistent enough to be considered a great running back, in my opinion. He was just serviceable. That's what I would, if I had a word to describe Donovan Edwards' career at Michigan, it would be serviceable. He was not good. He was not consistent enough for me to consider him a great Michigan running back. Nowhere near the level of Blake Corum. Kalel Mullings is better than Donovan Edwards, but both of them are going to be gone next year. Jordan Marshall looks like will be our starting running back next season. He looked great in the bowl game. Had over 100 rushing yards. But we're going to have a lot of players leaving. Mason Graham is gone. Colson Loveland is gone. Will Johnson is gone. That's the thing with Will Johnson. It's like, oh, that's gonna be a big loss for Michigan. It's like I forgot he existed. Will Johnson hardly played at all this year. I think he got hurt in the Washington game, and then he never came back. And then Colson Loveland, he didn't play in the Ohio State game for some reason. It's an undisclosed injury. Then he didn't play in the bowl game. That's the thing that really annoys me was when people opt out of bowl games. If you opt out of a bowl game, you're a quitter. But that's all I got to say about Michigan for 2024. Was it a disappointing season? Yes. But we beat Ohio State. We beat Alabama in our bowl. We won a bowl game in Sean Moore's first season. I mean, we won back-to-back bowl games. When was the last time Michigan did that? And we won all of our trophy games. We beat Michigan State, beat Minnesota, beat Northwestern. So was 8-5, and that's the thing with Michigan. How good of a team that we can be. The fact that Michigan was terrible this year, or considered terrible, and we went 8-5. Our offense was abysmal. It was the worst we've seen. This is the worst Michigan team we've seen in recent history. And we won 8 games, and we beat Ohio State and Alabama. So take that as you will, but that's 2024 in the books. We'll see what happens in 2025. See you guys.